Some of you will have been to Tandem conferences here before, and I know that Tandem have for many years now been promoting this idea of compassion in mental health care and compassionate systems, compassionate individuals. They're not, it feels a little bit risky, a little bit out there to be talking about compassion in mental health care, but why? Why is it so risky? Why is it that when Tandem start talking about this, we all go, But they're there. It's a worldwide phenomenon now. It's time we catch up, and I'm really grateful for the leadership that Tandem have shown in this space, which is why today they've invited Debbie Ling to come and talk to you for a bit longer to help you understand these issues. Debbie is a senior clinician social worker. She is a meditation and mindfulness teacher and a lecturer in the Department of Social Work, Monash University, and she's part of the Epworth Monash Rehabilitation Medicine Unit. Debbie is also a PhD candidate undertaking research into the relationship between the perception of common humanity and compassion in healthcare workers. She has developed a compassion training intervention for healthcare workers, which has attracted attention from around the world. Debbie sits on the Charter for Compassion Australia Compassion Council and is a member of the Australia 21 Mindful Futures Network Advisory Group. She's exactly the right person to speak to us today about compassion. Please welcome Debbie Ling.
Thank you, Kim. And it's a real honour to be here. Such an important aim for a compassionate mental health system. So I've actually just completed my PhD on compassion, supervised by Dr. Melissa Petrakis and Professor John Olver. Yes, thank you. And I'm actually wanting to talk today about some of the latest developments in compassion research and compassion training around the world, which shows some promise for improving a compassionate mental health system. So, in brief, compassion has become a major topic around the world. Now, we all know compassion's been around for centuries, it's not a new topic, but essentially over the last 20 years, largely as a result of new research from functional MRI studies, showing that compassion is a positive state of mind. It's associated with feelings of warmth, concern, reward, affiliation, and compassion is innate. It's part of our evolutionary requirement. Even young children and animals show compassion to each other, and that's what helps humans survive. So as a result of this, in pretty much the last 10 years, there's been a number of compassion training courses developed. One of the front runners is from Stanford, which established the Centre for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education in 2008, and they developed the Stanford Compassion Cultivation training course, which has been running for about 10 years now. Up until recently, you could only do this course in the States, so this training is actually quite popular in the States, but it's starting to filter down to Australia and the rest of the world. And just to show the importance of compassion in terms of on the world stage and in the research world, the University of California, San Diego, mentioned last month that they're opening a $100 million compassion and empathy research centre. So we're just saying it's quite a strong recognition now about the importance of compassion research, compassion training, understanding what it is, and helping workers around the world and services improve. So there's a recognition around the world about a lack of compassion in many health and mental health services. And there's also a recognition that compassion can be easily disrupted, and I'll talk about that in a minute. There are a range of factors that come into play, both at the intrapersonal level, but also at the systems level, organisation level, external factors. And there's considerable debate regarding how to address this issue. And essentially, Marie and I were having a discussion last week on the phone, and we were both in absolute agreement that it's got to be addressed at every level. So we're talking obviously individual level of workers, but also the management, the leadership level, organisational level, cultural level, and society-wide, which is where it's so pleasing with some of the promising outcomes that we're looking for from the Royal Commission, because we need to really emphasise the message about compassion at every level. Just very briefly, so my PhD was investigating the relationship between the perception of common humanity and compassion, and I was so pleased to be hearing Andrew Tomlinson talk when he was talking about the fact that it's not difficult people, it's people with difficulties. Common humanity is essentially that as well, saying that we're all people first. Everyone wishes to be happy, no one wishes to suffer, anyone can get sick at any time, and it's really trying to emphasise the fact that our shared humanity and the fact that a lot of the mental health systems do accidentally at times dehumanise, and just a lot of the systems in place mean that people get treated as sort of in a functional way as opposed to in a human way. And so there's a big push with the compassion training around the world to try and shift this. And obviously this is a long haul approach, but it is quite exciting. And as part of my PhD research, we trialled a single session compassion training at Epworth Healthcare and published it last year. And we've had a lot of interest from around the world because there's so little access to this. It's early days, but it's exciting. So briefly, a standard definition of compassion that's largely everyone's in agreement is it's a sense of concern that arises when we're confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to see that suffering relieved. Compassion is a virtue in all cultures, so it holds an elevated status due to its inclusiveness of all humans. It's the basis of all caring societies. It taps into the noble sentiments of things like the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Interestingly, though, in common discussion and even in the research world, compassion sometimes gets mixed up with other terms such as pity, empathy and sympathy. And I'll just make the comment that pity is probably the one that gets most mixed up with. And with pity, there's a sort of looking down on another person. You might feel sorry for someone, but it lacks that sense of equality. So the reason why there's so much interest in compassion and why compassion is often a core value of most health and mental health services is built into the definition of compassion is this sense of respect and inclusiveness. And I've got a dedicated slide for empathy. So the difference between compassion and empathy is one of the exciting things in the research world recently. Functional MRI studies are showing that they can have different neural pathways, and I'll explain. So empathy is the most common term that's been around for more decades. There's been more research, and most of us have been trained in empathy, which is to understand how someone else is feeling. But functional MRI research is now showing that empathy can go down two pathways. One of them is where you're concerned about the other, and that's a positive pathway, and that's similar to compassion, where you're concerned about the other, so it keys into feelings of warmth, concern. The other pathway is where empathy accidentally turns into empathic distress, and that's also called personal distress. And that's a negative, painful state of mind where one accidentally over-identifies with the suffering of another or becomes distressed by their suffering. And although this appears to be a subtle distinction, it's actually quite key. And the literature suggests that this is perhaps what happens to a lot of workers at times, where they may accidentally go into empathic distress, which leads to burnout. So the term compassion fatigue is now actually understood to be actually empathic distress fatigue. And so this new understanding of the difference between compassion and empathy is what is driving a lot of the interest in compassion training programs and heightening workers' understanding of what compassion is and to be aware of the danger of going into empathic distress. So empathic distress might be where a worker sometimes, or anyone, might think, I can't deal with that, or this is too much, or I have to get away from the other. And it's accidental, but when people aren't aware of that, that's very different to compassion, where the neuroscience is showing that if someone holds a compassionate stance to another, even if you, as Andrew said, there are times where we may not be able to alleviate the suffering of the other, but if we still hold a compassionate stance where we recognise the other's suffering and we have a wish for their suffering to be alleviated, not only is that a positive neural pathway for yourself, but it's obviously good for everyone. It's still better than going into empathic distress. So I'm just heightening the distinction there. Probably the most important aspect of my research was on why the perception of common humanity is essentially a fundamental prerequisite for compassion to anyone, or unbiased compassion, or you could call it universal compassion. So we naturally tend to have compassion for our close friends and family. But what you require in a compassionate mental health system is you need all workers to, in an ideal world, have compassion for everyone that they meet. So in the compassion training courses that have been developed by Stanford and also Emory University have developed a cognitively based compassion training, front and centre is heightening this idea of common humanity. So the recognition that we all have the same basic needs and wish to be happy and avoid suffering. Anyone can become unwell. Everyone is someone's mother, father, sister, brother, son and daughter. And I'm actually on a mission. I've been trialling this at Epworth Healthcare, which is Victoria's largest private not-for-profit healthcare organisation, 7,000 staff. And I've been talking with managers there saying, I just would love to see this slogan on all the wards everywhere, just that reminder to staff. Everyone is someone's mother, father, brother, son, daughter. So why is the perception of common humanity such a powerful viewpoint to have? Well, basically it prevents in-group, out-group bias because we relate to all others as fellow human beings. Everyone becomes part of the same group. It becomes a we instead of a us and a them. And it makes it easy. Someone who holds this perspective finds it easy to have compassion towards anyone else. Differences completely dissolve. And I'll give a real-life example of this. So in 2017 in the US, there were some prisoners who were out doing community service. They were actually gardening, cutting the grass in a cemetery under the supervision of an armed prison guard. And the armed prison guard actually had a heart attack and collapsed and fell to the ground. And these particular 6 prisoners rushed over, ripped off his bulletproof vest, put aside his gun and did CPR on him, saved his life, and then used his mobile phone to call the ambulance. And when they were asked afterwards why they did that, why they didn't just run off, they said it wasn't the case of him being the prison guard and us the prisoners. It was just man down, you go and help. And I think that's a very powerful example. And at the same time, in another state in the US, there had been 2 prisoners who had actually murdered their prison guard to escape. So I'm just highlighting the importance when people hold this perspective of common humanity, shared humanity, you know, we're all the same. It really leads to pro-social behaviours towards everyone. And I've got a couple of clips that I'm really delighted to be able to share with you. Some of you might have seen these. So the first one is a Danish TV2 ad, and these clips really capture the common humanity message. So Danish TV2 is a Danish TV station, and they developed this ad called All That We Share. It only goes for about 3 minutes, and it was released in January 2017 and went viral around the world.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
And then we'll go to the next slide. So this slide so this is Danish TV Ad 2. They did a part 2 to that series, and so this one is now All That We Share Connected, and it's was released in March early this year, and talking more at the interpersonal level, how easy it is sometimes to let it start. That's fine.
These people have a lot to talk about. They just don't know it yet. In a minute, we'll show them that they have more in common than they think.
Hej alle sammen. Tak fordi I er kommet. Thomas, vil du stille dig der? Og Aske? Thomas, du bor med din familie i et dejligt hus på Vinkelhøj 8 i Viby. Før I flyttede ind, var det faktisk dit barndomshjem, Aske.
Det er rigtigt. Ja. Fodbold i haven om sommeren. Og,
det kan jeg lige forestille mig.
Ja, præcis.
Vi laver igen.
Mathilde, vil du komme herop? Hej. I to har faktisk stået over for hinanden før.
Okay.
Men der var I 12 år. Og det var i en rugbykamp.
Okay, ja.
Kampen endte i øvrigt 42-0 til Askes hold.
Tak for kampen.
Ja, tak.
Inger. Mathilde, den nat, du kom til verden for 27 år siden på Christiania, var Inger det første menneske, du så.
Var du min jordmor? Nå. Det var fint. Kan du huske det?
Anna, i 2012 er din mand ude at løbe en tur. Pludselig falder han om med hjertestop.
Ja.
Heldigvis er der en, der reagerer hurtigt og redder ham. Knud, vil du komme herop?
Tak. Godt at hilse på dig.
Just below the surface, a total stranger can turn out to be someone you're actually connected to.
Det er godt et stykke tid siden.
Someone who rouses forgotten memories. Like the very first kiss. Someone who reminds you that you're not alone. But that somebody else also has a bulldog named Prebin. Someone like Thomas, who put out a fire at Vibeka's place.
Vi er så taknemmelige for, at brandvæsenet kom så hurtigt.
Someone you've been gaming with for years, but
Kender I to hinanden?
have never met.
Altamon, mød Lil Salt.
Det er løgn. Du er topfraggeren. Jeg var fandme kendt den anden i 3-4 år, uden at nogensinde mødt den anden, eller set den anden før. Altså.
If we approach each other, we might find out that we share the same destiny.
Rana og Maha, I kom til Danmark fra Syrien for 4 år siden. Dorit og Jan, I har en lignende historie fra 2. verdenskrig.
Jeg har prøvet at være flygtning, og jeg vil aldrig glemme det. Det har betydet usigeligt meget.
Og Rikke, det var din oldefar, der risikerede sit liv ved at sejle Jan over Øresund den oktoberaften i 1943.
It's easy to mind your own business. It takes a little more effort to mind the community. But doesn't the feeling of having something in common, something that connects us, make it all worthwhile? TV2, all that we share.
Yes, as you can see, they're really powerful and I think such important humanising messages. So part of the broader picture of the compassion training is trying to get material like this as part of a compassion training package for workers, just for people to get the reminder, as I said, which I think the videos beautifully capture, that there are so many areas in which we might interconnect or have connections that we're not aware of. And I think it's fair to say that most workers, most of the time, are doing the best they can, but the systems that have been put in place are absolutely dehumanising, and there needs to be many ways to try and penetrate through that. And as I said, compassion training is one way of trying to get that changing. So in terms of ideas for creating a more compassionate mental health system, obviously the compassion training can be at the level of the individual worker, also for leadership, and certainly this is something that Tandem is leading from the front foot, is talking about compassionate leadership, the need to influence and change organisational culture, influence public opinion and expectation, and also the role of the media and social media. And so this is where there's certainly, I think, a lot of opportunities with such high profile on the Royal Commission into Mental Health. Obviously also everyone recognises that the mental health system is in crisis, so these are not quick fixes, it's long haul, but it's absolutely imperative to try at every level. In the compassion training as well, just to let you know, we also give staff training for when compassion is challenged. So the literature shows it's easy for it to be disrupted. And so you're trying to train staff to understand that if someone else is presenting with a challenging behaviour, what's driving that? Where's that coming from? And in the Stanford Compassion Cultivation Training course and the Emory Cognitively Based Compassion Training course, they highlight again and again that if someone is presenting as angry or upset, what's behind that? And the recognition that behind that is some sort of fear or lack, which we can all relate to. And there's a beautiful phrase by Marshall Rosenberg, who is the creator of nonviolent communication. And the phrase is, all unskillful behaviour is the tragic expression of an unmet need. And so he encourages workers to understand that when someone may be presenting with challenging behaviours, to understand behind that there's an unmet need, and we all recognise at times that our needs are not met, and once again to try and connect at a humanising level. And with the compassion training as well, there's also the emphasis on reminding staff that compassion, functional MRI research is showing, is good for the giver. So it's win-win. It's good for the giver, it improves their well-being, but it creates a more close connected environment. And just a reminder too that love and compassion are necessities for human survival, and that's actually a quote from the Dalai Lama. And finally, I'm almost finished. In the compassion training too, they really highlight the fact about interdependence, which I think those Danish TV2 ads show really beautifully. And just for us to reflect that each and every one of us has been helped by countless others. So not just our primary caregivers, but if you reflect back on the course of your whole life, sometimes people can have quite a fleeting connection with you, but it can make a difference. And so it's trying to remind workers that even things like a smile or taking that extra moment, how are you? And that every action, big and small, makes a difference. And also that change can come from many directions, and I think that this slide in particular gives us a lot of hope and inspiration for the way forward. And just in the last couple of minutes before I finish up, there's just a very brief compassion exercise that I'd like to share with you that the Stanford Compassion Cultivation training course gets all participants to do. So they really emphasise this common humanity slogan, just like me, this person wishes to be happy and not to suffer. And they really encourage you to try and view everyone like that. And so we're just going to spend about 30 seconds on this. So the first exercise is I'd like you just to think of a loved one, someone close to you, and where it's easy to have compassion for them. And you're welcome just to drop your eyes and just spend 5 seconds thinking the thought, just like me, this person wishes to be happy and not to suffer. Okay, and then we'll do the next exercise, which is where I would like you to think of a neutral person or someone you have never met before or have no relationship with. It could be a person off the street. And once again, just bring an image of a neutral person to mind and just spend a few seconds thinking, just like me, this person wishes to be happy and not to suffer. And finally, we'll do the third exercise, which of course is the most challenging one, and that is where you do think of a person who you find challenging for whatever reason. And once again, just pull an image of them to your mind and think, just like me, this person wishes to be happy and not to suffer, and just spend a few seconds on that. And now just bring your attention back to the big room, and we're just going to finish up with some quotes on compassion from some luminaries. And I think I've run out of time. I'm actually here all day, so if any of you have a particular interest in this, feel free to come up and have a chat to me. Thank you very much.